I'm Ashish Rishi, CEO of Unwritten Health. Unwritten Health helps pharma and CRO teams see how underserved patients will actually experience their protocol and product in the real world before the design gets locked in. Our core product is called Equity Engine, a decision support tool that shows clinical teams where trial design collides with real lives and what to do about it. Most trials are still designed by very smart people in rooms far away from the lives of patients they need. So on paper, the protocol looks good, but in practice, it clashes with work, childcare, housing, transport, culture, religion, all the things that shape whether someone can realistically take part in a clinical trial. And the result is familiar: slow recruitment, higher dropout, protocol amendments, and data that doesn't fully reflect the populations that regulators and payers are most worried about. And that's the gap Unwritten Health and Equity Engine were built to close. Unwritten Health is an ethnographic, patient experience, and real-world insight company focused on clinical development. Our core product, Equity Engine, is a platform that combines long-term relationships with underserved communities, structured collection of lived experience data, and an interface clinical teams can use to stress test protocols and plans against real lives. Simply put, we work with underserved communities to understand how they live with conditions day to day. And Equity Engine turns that into evidence you can plug directly into clinical trial design, feasibility, recruitment strategy, and access work. We work with pharma and biotech teams running phase 2 and 3 trials in Europe, CROs who want stronger patient experience evidence and feasibility and protocol optimization, and we'll also work with health systems and academic sponsors with specific inclusion and access questions. The people we speak to most are clinical development leaders, patient engagement and PPIE teams, and regulatory or market access leads who need their evidence to stand up in front of regulators and payers. So here's how Equity Engine works on a program. We start with your real problem, a specific protocol, program, or decision where you're worried about feasibility, recruitment, or health equity. Together, we would then define the questions you actually need patient experience evidence to answer. For instance, that could be: where will the visit schedule break in real life? What would make this digital tool usable or unusable for certain groups? And what trade-offs are patients realistically willing to make? We work through trusted community partners, people embedded in underserved neighborhoods and networks to reach patients who are usually missing from clinical trials. That might be specific ethnic communities, it may be low socioeconomic groups, or people with historically low research participation. Instead of one-off surveys, we collect ongoing narratives about how people live with their condition and interact with healthcare, what gets in the way, what would help, and how they perceive research itself. That includes structured interviews, digital diaries, and other ethnographic methods that go deeper than tick boxes. Our platform, Equity Engine, then structures and analyzes this lived experience so it's usable for clinical development team. We map insights to specific parts of your protocol, highlight high-risk design elements, and segment by things like geography, work patterns, or social determinants of health. Finally, you'll see all of this in Equity Engine as clear, navigable outputs, so you can see views of how different communities will experience your protocol. It flags where feasibility and burden are likely to be a challenge. It gives concrete options on what to change, what to watch, and where you may need further evidence. When you run multiple programs through Equity Engine, you're not starting from zero each time either. You're building a reusable, longitudinal evidence base on underserved communities. So here are some use cases. Sponsors and CROs use Unwritten Health and Equity Engine to stress test protocols before they launch, such as, spot procedures, schedules, and criteria that look fine in a slide deck, but will fall over in real life. You'll be able to design more realistic recruitment and retention strategies. For instance, understand what support, communication, and logistics underserved patients actually need to join and stay in a study, and where to focus that budget. Also, you'll be able to strengthen regulatory and access narratives by showing how patient experience evidence from underrepresented groups has shaped design and benefit risk thinking, aligning with where regulators and HTA bodies are heading. Over time, this becomes a longitudinal data set of lived experience in underserved populations, something you can revisit across multiple studies instead of starting from scratch. Over time, the work you put through Equity Engine doesn't just answer one-off questions, it builds what we literally call your Equity Engine around clinical development. That means continuity, insight will compound, you're not relearning the same lessons about the same communities every time you start a new protocol. Comparability, you can see patterns across conditions, indications, geographies, and social context complex, not just within a single study. So credibility. You can show regulators, payers, and internal stakeholders that equity isn't a slogan. It's backed by a structured, longitudinal evidence base. Through Equity Engine, we support you to stop health equity being a side initiative or a CSR slide and becomes part of how you actually run clinical development. There are three things that set us apart. We are community trust first. We don't parachute into communities for one-off projects. We build long-term relationships through local partners so people feel safe sharing what their lives are really like. We provide depth plus structure. We focus on deep contextual understanding, how people live, not just what they tick, and then structure it so clinical and regulatory teams can use it in real decisions. And we support clinical development, not generic engagement. So everything is anchored on de-risking clinical development, protocol, feasibility, recruitment, and access. Equity Engine is built for those decisions, not for generic marketing or comms. If I was to summarize Unwritten Health in one sentence, it would be: Unwritten Health helps you build and use Equity Engine for clinical development, so your trials and plans work in the real lives of the patients regulators and payers are increasingly focused on, especially in underserved communities. So if you're responsible for a clinical development program and this resonates, follow along on LinkedIn, subscribe on YouTube, or get in touch to explore how Equity Engine could support your next clinical trial.